And I'd like to welcome to the stage our panel. So please take your seats, guys. We have Diego Fria from Stussy. We have Josh Duggan from Vervaunt, Gavin Williams from Creed, and we have Iris Schiefer from BigCommerce. Please give a warm welcome to them.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we are all feeling energized. We've had some lunch and we're ready to kick off the business track for this afternoon. I'm Iris Schiefer. I'm part of the large retail sales team at BigCommerce, a member of the MACH Alliance Growth Council, and a longtime friend and supporter of Klevu and this wonderful ecosystem that they've gathered here today. I'm also going to be your moderator for the next 30 minutes. Topic for today is discovering new markets. And when we were planning out this session, we wanted to make sure that we were touching on several pillars of that kind of international expansion journey. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the kind of planning and sort of strategy piece, channel and marketing strategy, but also digging into that scaling operations piece. So hopefully there'll be a little bit of something for everybody in this session. As we've only got 30 minutes, I'm going to save my favorite icebreaker session for the champagne reception tonight. The question is, if you were a drink, which one would you be and why? So look out for that later. You might get asked. And instead, we are going to dig straight in. We will try and leave a little bit of time for questions at the end, but if we don't get round to your question, then just catch us during the break. So without further ado, let's get you introduced to your panel. Gavin, Josh, Diego, thank you so much for joining me here today. If you could start off with just a little bit about who you are, where you work, and what you do.
All right. Is it working? Yeah. Good. Hi, guys. I'm Diego. I work at Stussy, the American streetwear company, and I'm the e-commerce director based in London. I'm originally from Buenos Aires. And I live in Southwest, and I work for an American company. So that's my brain.
Hello. So I'm Josh Duggan, one of the co-founders of Vervaunt. We're a performance marketing agency and e-commerce consultancy. We're a team of 44. Work with some great brands. We work with Stussy, work with Osprey, Molten Brown, and a lot of premium fashion brands as well. So we work with Ganni, Cos, Pangaea, and quite a few others.
Hi, I'm Gavin Williams. I'm the global digital director at Creed Fragrances. Prior to that, I worked at Farfetch, heading up their Store of the Future unit, and have spent the majority of my career in luxury brands and expanding them into either new features or new territories. And the answer is bitter lemon.
It's a good choice. And actually, since you're sitting next to me, I'm going to pick on you first. And I know because we were discussing this yesterday, you've got a very interesting framework in terms of assessing viability for entry into a new market and kind of setting that team up for success. Would love to, if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I hope this chimes with most of the audience, actually, but I've sort of fine-tuned my sort of current thinking about a decision framework through the pandemic, because with e-commerce becoming front of mind, every CEO and every shareholder wanted everything everywhere all at once. And it's just not possible. And at that time, with so many competing interests and so many business cases not coming my way, but lots of very generalistic things like, we need to smash the Middle East, we need to do this, we need to do that. I can see lots of nods coming here. There's no way to make decision making. So what I like to do is I like to think further down the line. So if I commission a project, what I then have to go and do is go and talk to a CTO about backing me. I need to talk to operations directors about backing me, marketing guys about funding, everything I need to speak to as an e-commerce guy. And my responsibility to the business is to get those guys on board, because the biggest failure of all these new market initiatives is when you don't have agreement and collaboration. And it is high risk. I'm sure most people in here have had a failure and a success. So look, the way I look at it is that I get rid of my computer. I don't go to a spreadsheet. I get a piece of A4 paper and a Sharpie. And I set and answer 4 questions. If we're in the market, offline, what are we currently doing in terms of our sales? So what's our level of sales? Secondly, what's the category penetration in that market? It's really clear. What is the e-commerce category penetration in that market? The third one, if we've got partners selling our stuff in that market, what's their current sales potential What are they currently doing, either through distributors or whatever forum you're in? And lastly, really importantly, if you're not in a market, there's a vacuum. Whereas a vacuum, there's a grey market. So what is the grey market doing? And what pricing are they established the product as? And invariably, it's going to be lower than we want it to be at. So with those four things, four inputs, you've got a very simple calculation for me about whether a market is worth doing. Really simple. If it's 50 million quid in a market that you're doing offline, you've got 20% category penetration, your goal is 10 million. If you've got a competitor there, or you've got, not a competitor, a partner there doing 5 million of that already, that's going to increase your cost base because you need to capture those customers too. So it's a really simple thing, and then I put on the back of that I'm not going to make any money for 3 years. And I need to tell everyone I'm not going to make any money for 3 years because it's really hard, even as an established brand like Creed is, to go into a new market. We're live in 70 different countries, but we're only online in 12. So if I go into a new market, the assumption the business is going to be, we're really massive in that market, so we're going to capture all the market share in the first week we launch. What a load of BS. It just doesn't happen. You have got to go hard in marketing and acquisition costs. So I always have a curve that says first 18 months, and then the hockey stick will happen if you've got a great product and a great proposition. So I always start there before I engage with legal, before I engage with the CTO, before any of those things. I need a business case that says that is worth doing. Now, if it's not worth doing in terms of B2C, you push it down the line into, right, we'll go for a distributor model and we'll do it differently, or we'll rely on third parties and marketplaces. So that's kind of where my mindset is at, and I can appear a blocker quite often to people in my business. But 80% of the work goes up front in discovery and 20% on execution. If it's the other way around, you just fail. That's my view.
Diego, similar thoughts from you in terms of the kind of KPIs and the marketing focus?
That was a very tidy framework over there. We, at Stussy and myself, we would usually do it in a bit of a looser way. We would try to understand where is demand, right? Say, however we count it, whether it be how many people are coming through our physical stores, how about our resellers, how about online, and then we kind of make a decision as to whether we want to open a 3PL there or another store or to localize better. So we try to follow demand, we try to meet demand to a degree, and we take it, we do it carefully, right? We wouldn't do many of these projects at once, for example. But yeah, for us, it's more about meeting the demand, localize somewhat carefully, but not slowly. And most importantly, make sure that we have the right team for it. So, for example, we operate across many countries. We have many warehouses, many instances. So it's really important that we have people that understand the local culture. That is super important for me and my team. So we have a truly diverse, fully distributed team, whether it be Japan, Korea, North America, UK and Europe, etc. So I think that element can get lost. It's really easy to assume that you understand another culture, and it's also really easy to assume that your customers that love your brand shop in a similar way. And I think that's a very common mistake that I have made, and obviously many other peer brands. So yeah, understanding your team makeup and the diversity is important.
I'd like to focus a little bit more on that demand piece, specifically kind of that qualitative behavioral element, because I know for Stussy, you've been really popular in Japan and Korea, and also Totem, where you were previously. What kind of mechanisms did you have in place in terms of assessing that consumer behavior and how that purchase journey might be different in those markets versus, say, the UK and US?
Yes, regarding demand itself, we just keep it very simple. We look at sessions. We understand how customers are representing the brand. We have local fans of the brand that feed us information. In terms of understanding sort of the local behavior, we actually have local colleagues or friends of the brand that help us explain sort of the key moments in the customer's journey, right? Whether it's discovery, payment methods, search, etc. And then we try to understand: are we meeting that behavior? Are we able to offer that local experience, which is really important for us? And if not, then we create a project and we execute. So we slowly, even today, we're always evolving, always evolving, and always getting to know the market and traveling there and talking to people and having local partners is super important for us, specifically for countries like the ones that you mentioned. So just studying and learning and keeping that kind of student mindset is super important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, from your perspective, I know Vervaunt has a very strong performance marketing practice, so would like to learn a little bit more in terms of marketing to those shoppers that Diego and Gavin have just mentioned. Do you see any kind of particular trends or nuances in terms of marketing, like to take into account those different behaviors?
Yeah, great questions. I think, just to touch on like the macro point around demand and looking at like wider considerations, another big one currently is consumer confidence. So I think in the current economic climate that we're in, we're seeing a lot of brands pushing and trying to kind of like scale a bit more in the US. So I'd imagine over the next 12 months, it's probably going to be a better economy from an e-com perspective in the US than the UK. So we're seeing a lot of clients trying to double down their marketing strategy there. Just on the US specifically, we had a really cool case study of one client where I guess the US is quite a difficult market to enter. So obviously it's massive in terms of scale. What we did with them was we identified 100 cities which accounted for the majority of their revenue and a much higher conversion rate than the other cities in the country. And what we did was we identified characteristics of those cities. So I think the majority of them had a Barry's boot camp, they had a college campus, and then what we did from there was identified other cities which reflected those characteristics. So we scaled via kind of like a cluster approach, which was quite nice. And in terms of other tactics, I think one thing which brands do is they rely quite heavily on social. So we've got a lot of brands who would attribute international success down to social. But to quote Shopify, there were double the amount of online merchants in 2021 than 2020. So it's a very kind of like convoluted, very like aggressive space to be in. And what we suggest to brands is doing things beyond just paid social. So as the guys have mentioned, having like wholesale presence, having a physical store, having physical presence can be massive. And I think that goes a long way. If you've got like strategic wholesale partners in new markets, it does really help build awareness. It can be quite a cost-effective way to acquire new customers. And if you rely solely on paid social, you would need to be quite aggressive with your paid media budgets. But I guess just having like a full funnel approach, and the physical store piece is massive as well. Like the brands we've had who have really driven success in a new market have had physical pop-ups. They've had wholesalers with physical presence. They've had kind of like feet on the ground, as it were. So definitely like a big suggestion would be don't rely on social as much as it probably would be your number one focus. You should have wider business like considerations you're putting into place as well.
You have perfectly lined up my next two questions, and I am going to break it down into two questions. I want to focus on the social piece first, and absolutely agree not to focus purely on that. But interested to hear from both of you, Gavin and Diego, in terms of the role social has played in building that brand relationship in those new markets.
Yeah, I'll take this one to start. I couldn't agree more with you, Josh. I think offline is so important for any online success. We kind of know that it's a given. What we've seen, especially post-pandemic, everyone wants experience. It's been said before, right? I want experiences. I want to feel physical. I want contact. They call it revenge spending in China, or whatever they call it. And you kind of get it, right? So when we look at social, the best model is to look at what China does, because they are leaps ahead of what we do. I've got a very controversial, and I don't want to offend anyone in here, but I'm going to if I have to, which will be no Botox marketing. And what I mean is when we do social, I'm trying to engage with creators. I'm trying to engage with people with talent, not people with injections. And what I'm really trying to push with a brand association is we're moving much more towards, in our experience, people that admire and respect other people in terms of content and what they create. TikTok's a fantastic example of it, right? That's why Instagram's on the floor in terms of time spent on the platform. And if you look at China and how they do it, it's extraordinary, because that's how their whole model works. It's all of our money goes into that, and it goes to events, pop-ups, and it goes to getting the right people there, getting really high impact, fantastic mobile experiences that we can push across different territories in cities that are, 15 to 20 million people that half of us haven't even heard of half the names. It's an extraordinary place. They've written the rule book on how to do it properly. And I think there's so much laziness in how we're approaching social media as brands. Honestly believe this, of we need to get the influencer, we need to get this person because they've got followers. This is absolute BS. It's a wrong metric. What you're trying to do is identify the influencers and the social media plan that represents your brand. Or else you're just going to go back to celebrity marketing, and no one wants to do that. So let's get back into define your brand, understand what those values are, and find the right people to execute it. But don't think you can do it all, because as Josh said, it's all going to be paid for unless you get the offline presence. And if you're lucky enough, you've got a really brilliant brand team that totally live this world, and they get it, and they're totally aligned with digital, then you're going to win. If you don't, you've got some challenges. I'm sorry to be a bit brunt on that one, but that's my sort of sense of where I get frustrated on social, because it's incredibly lazy the way the majority of brands approach it.
Yeah, so you'd say it's more that kind of micro-influencer, kind of like finding those more niche influencers.
Not really micro. I mean, if we all of us today, my current fascination on TikTok, God dear, I think my marriage has ended because of TikTok. I spend so much time on it because its algorithm is frighteningly good, way better than what Meta have come up with. And you're sitting there and I'm getting incredible stuff of my interest, people with hundreds of thousands, not millions, people who are doing amazing work creating, the guy that did the Burberry birthday cake was unbelievable, right? You looked at his numbers beforehand, it was good numbers, but that simple association was Burberry very cleverly saying, we want someone who does something really cool, who creates something, he's got a talent, and we want him to make a scarf, or whatever it was, can't remember now, in the Burberry way. Brilliant. Much better than that, than someone going, in our industry, fragrance in particular is, yeah, I just sprayed this, it's so nice. I mean, come on. That's going back to the old school advertising of like the 70s, so I don't want that. So find the people that represent your brand, and they're not micro, they're huge, their audiences are huge, absolutely brilliant. And you can make the assumption straight away that if they respect that creation, they're going to really respect your brand. They're more likely to like your brand than like the celebrity.
And I might just add a point there as well around kind of like having relevant content. So Facebook's number one recommendation for brands is to have like an array of assets which talk to different buying motivations. So the biggest problem we see is as a photo shoot and all of the content looks exactly the same, whereas if you think of how the algorithms work, you want UGC review style content which is pushed to people who really buy into social proof. You then want the brand storytelling campaign assets for people who buy into brand purpose and the brand image and the campaign. And one big issue is just we get a photo shoot, all looks exactly the same, whereas what you need is to give the algorithm as a broader spectrum of content as possible, and then it will find the people who are most likely to engage with that. So that's, that's one big challenge we see, so I just thought I'd raise that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also wanted to touch on another piece that you mentioned before, and that was the physical presence. And Diego, going to start with you on this one. In terms of how have you kind of penetrated those markets would you say you focus more on your own physical stores, or is it mostly through local retailers? What's been your strategy for that?
Yeah, we see the stores as a place where people can go and experience the brand. So for us, they are really, really important. They are Stussy, so it's the most Stussy you can get after the site, I guess. No, but really, so for us, it's really important. And we have many stores. We've been around for 40 years. We used to rely a lot on wholesale when we're, like everyone, moving away from it. So super important, our stores, our online store. It's a destination place. If you go to the Soho store, it's a queue always, and I can't get in, for example. So, and the strategy is just, there's really no playbook. Just open where you think is right, fits the brand. There's a culture there, and just open a store like we did in Singapore not long ago. So we don't dwell too much on data, or we don't follow any guides or anything. We just do what feels right for the brand. I just wanted to touch on one thing quickly regarding the content. I guess you call it the variety of content for upper funnel, etc. I think it depends on the brand. I just want to say that not every brand should follow. Not every brand should follow what Facebook says, because depending on the platform that can control your reach, I believe that is very dangerous. And for a brand like us, for example, so we don't invest in upper or marketing or anything like that at all. And to his point, the grassroots. At the grassroots level is super important, events, shows, etc. So it's really important that every brand follows what they think is best for them and not what someone at Facebook says. And I've always believed that very strongly. And yeah, not put your trust on, say, an algorithm or someone that can control your reach. So we work really hard on bringing people to a newsletter database. Then we can have that conversation directly, and also giving them a really good experience on our site or our physical stores if they can get in.
In terms of controlling the reach, though, I guess that kind of comes back to that physical presence. And obviously, like, you've got very strong D2C presence. So, you've got control of that data and like how the customer views the brand and the experience that you give them. But obviously can't discount the power of kind of the retailer strategy and kind of selling through those bigger retailers. So, how do you strike that balance? You mean in terms of us not leaning on a platform for reach? No, in terms of sort of, if you were, selling through a retailer, sort of like, if we were to have like a Harvey Nichols here or something like that, obviously, you don't have full control of how that brand is displayed and how that brand story is told. Yeah, we're moving away really fast from many retailers. For example, we are on Dover Street Market down the street, and they are good friends of ours and partners of ours. And we have our own stand, and we can sort of collaborate in how the brand is presented. So we prefer that way of working. So we always work with partners, not just retailers or wholesalers. It's people that brands or retailers that have a point of view and a really good angle as well that fit the brand. So we do it collaboratively. We had this discussion yesterday, so I'm keen to...
Well, because I've been on both sides. I've worked at Harvey Nichols and Liberty, but also with Farfetch as a multi-category site. It's very interesting on the multi-category side, right? It's very different. But honestly, if you've got a really strong brand, then it's in their interest to represent your brand really well. And if you partner with them, what are they looking for? I can tell you, I don't know if there are any department store or multi-category people in the room. I'm sure there are. What the guys want is content, right? That's what they're dying for. They want stories because they're under a lot of pressure. Those teams there to create stories, to populate emails, all those things. Get ahead of the game and get in there and say, we've got this brilliant thing for you. They're going to bite your hand off. Now, some of them are going to want to charge loads of money. Well, fine, that comes over time. But we are a story-rich brand, like massively story-rich. If I can ask this one question of the audience, actually, someone in this room is wearing Santal 33, right? No? Right, why do you wear it? You love it. It's an unbelievable brand from Le Labo, right? It's the smell of New York. If you go in Soho, you can't smell it. I'm glad you're that far away because I love it so much. I fall apart at the seams when I smell it, right? It's an amazing fragrance. When I smell it on guys, I change my persuasion. When I smell it on girls, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it dominates the New York scene. You check out their Instagram, look at Overheard Le Labo, and you understand how they do it brilliantly. They're only on Instagram. They're not on YouTube. They're not on TikTok. They're not on everything. I'm slightly diverging here, but there's a point. The point is this. That's the story I sell when I sell Le Labo, the things I've just said. That's what the department stores want. That's your marketing. And to your point, if you really want to be an unbelievably great brand and you've got great product and you want to dominate your story, you've got to do it that way. And if you're lucky enough to work in story-driven brands like Le Labo is and like Creed is, awesome. How many people are wearing Aventus? That's simply not good enough. There you go. So this is the perfect match. And this is it. If you wear Le Labo, your boyfriend will wear a Ventus. This is absolutely true. Wow. That's great. My best friend now. That's brilliant. But look, so stories absolutely dominate. And the department stores, the multi-category sites, they are our lifeblood for a lot of us. They are absolutely our lifeblood. We call them our frenemies. We love them. We want to get the market share from them. But we want them to succeed because every time they sell a product, we make money too. Brilliant. So it is a fantastic relationship if you can really work hard on it.
Next time I host a panel, I'm going to wear Le Labo and see how that pans out. I'm not today. It's Penhaligon's Elynesia.
We discussed this last night. So that's a great choice. It's a great brand, if you like that.
I do. I just think it's nice. So I'm going to do one more because I did promise to cover the exciting topic of fulfillment, everybody's favourite.
I'll get my coat.
Actually, on that note, you can go first in terms of choosing between that cross-border model and then having a 3PL own entity in those markets. When do you strike the balance between the two?
Oh, blimey, what a tough question. So what we do, I'll keep this one simple because otherwise I'll hog the microphone. So what we do, I've got a really simple policy. We've got a brilliant distribution network, right? So that's how our model is built. So what I do is brilliant distribution partners. And if I enter a new market, I'll never entertain the idea of setting up a new warehouse or any of those things. Cross-border for us as a service proposition brand, it doesn't work. When you buy from Creed, you're expecting a proposition, packaging, an unboxing of unbelievable superior experience. And that's a key determinant for me. So what we do, we tell the distributor, you can distribute or you can fulfill from your warehouse and your capabilities. If they don't have it, we don't ask them to. And we give them a set of guidelines like it's any kind of style franchise model. And that's a great way, going back to that original question of the factors we have in decision-making, to guarantee your brand is delivered the way you want. We don't sell widgets. We sell dreams, we sell experience and stories and love and all of those beautiful things. The product is the enforcement of all of those human attributes. So what we would do is I don't even entertain cross-border on that front.
What about for you, Diego? And it's specifically, I know for fashion, it's a difficult balance to strike because returns tend to be fairly high for a lot of fashion brands.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that our return rate is incredibly low, the lowest I've ever seen. And I think it's because our fits, people know the brand, right? They probably wear it for years, so that's heaven. We do try to meet demand. I mean, globally, right? It's a huge challenge. We have quite a few 3PLs. And I also have my CFO yelling at me about my EBITDA, my percentages. So I know my thresholds. So I always try to stick to those. And I think understanding what is profitable for the brand and how much a brand is willing to invest or sacrifice margins-wise is really important. Because sometimes you're in acquisition mode, you should give up more of that margin. But if you are on seeking profit, then maintaining that is super important. So it depends really on those things as well that are very, very brand or company dependent.
Gotcha. So we are slowly but surely running out of time. So final question before maybe we can take one or two from the audience is anything further to add, any further pieces of advice? Josh, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. I'll probably just summarise what the guys have mentioned, but I think the first thing we would look at when entering a new market would be like the macro considerations. So how much brand demand have you got already? What's the competitive landscape? I guess any broad implications. So if you looked at Germany, for example, returns are more common in that market than other European markets, so making sure you've got the infrastructure in place to handle that. One thing I will mention, because I see it quite often, is almost like a recommendation of what not to do. So a lot of the brands we've worked with in the past have launched an EU store and have kind of just questioned us to launch all European markets together at once and just kind of like used a one-stop approach for all countries. But I think there's a massive benefit and like a real synergy benefit of if you focus and streamline your attentions on a few specific markets. So while we've spoke around the importance of physical presence, wholesale, if you do focus on certain markets, you can be much more strategic, spend a lot more time in there. I also think if you have people buying the product, seeing the product in person, it's easier to build a community if you focus in a certain region, easier to kind of like build that relationship with customers, build UGC content, push that into ads. So I think certainly wouldn't recommend going for like a blanket EU approach, which definitely in the past I've seen being done quite regularly. And then just to touch on your point in terms of the profitability of a new country again, this is again something I had multiple discussions around, is like how quickly can you scale and grow into a new market. And I think especially being in the performance world, a lot of brands just think you can turn on paid social and within a couple of months you'll be profitable. And just to give like some numbers, I guess, if you are focusing on kind of like online digital marketing only, you probably would expect like, I don't know who would use a cost of sale, but like a 40% cost of sale or like an MER or blended ROI of like 3 to 1. Like you need to be very aggressive with how much you're spending before you start to see your organic search picking up, before you see brand demand picking up, before your email database improves. So yeah, I do think one thing would be definitely don't just target all of Europe at once with a small budget. You really need to strategically pick a couple of markets that you want to go into, double down on budget, make sure you've got the right content in place, and yeah, hopefully that's how
I think that was a very good dig at me, and it was very good. we ran into that during COVID because we all had this thing, didn't we, where we had to go to market, so we had to make decisions that perhaps we wouldn't rationally. And all of the learning since, and all of my thoughts and instincts were right. You've got to go country specific because if you nail the country, it's great. And your point on unit economics, absolutely right. They're frightening in the first 6 months. You've got to sit in front of your FD and say, I'm hemorrhaging money. Well, that's fine because you've got to believe in the model. And if you've got the great product, the model in the 18-month period, it tends to work. It's like the Middle East thing's the same thing of, we've got to get the Middle East. I mentioned it earlier. Well, there's no such thing as the Middle East, is there? There's no such thing as Europe in that. That's an abstract thing. Each of those countries have unique properties, unique things that we need to consider before we're launching them. And then when you break down the Middle East as an example, each individual country is way less attractive in terms of its profitability. So you look at the Middle East as one and go, oh, yeah, we can do 50 million there. That's great. And they go, oh, I can't, because to actually do that, wow, what would we have to commit in terms of resource to each country? It would be phenomenally unprofitable. So breaking it down into the units and then backing your model and backing that investment up front is without doubt the only way to do it. Despite what other people, you get a lot of pressure coming down. Yeah, we're going to do it. It's really easy. But you guys are the ones that have to execute it, and it's hard, really hard.
Yeah, from my end, I would say stay authentic to the brand. The brand value is super important. Hire people that understand the values of your brand. And it doesn't matter how much data you have. In the end, you have to make a call. And I believe that between data and action, there's always a distance, and you need people that are willing to travel that distance with you. So that's my wrap-up.
Absolutely. Would we have time to take one or two from the audience?
Yeah, there's a question.
Oh, it's a long-range throw.
Oh, God.
Come on, Rachel.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, I'm hogging this
Score.
because I had a question before. But when it comes to internationalization, I think one of the examples I love is McDonald's. So you go into a different McDonald's, wherever you are in the world, and it's very different. But when it comes to retail, e-commerce, whether online or offline, what examples do you have, I guess, of key markets have you seen in your experience, like key differentiations when you get to different markets for the brand, and how do you translate that in different regions?
I could answer that one. I think understanding, for example, Korea is a great example, right? They shop in a very particular way. Their behavior is very different. They don't have Google, or they do, but they don't use it. They have very specific expectations regarding fulfillment, shipping cost, return services, customer services, expectations. And also they have their own style and their own, sort of almost universe, right? Commercially speaking. So really understanding that, I believe, is the key beyond demand and obviously all the basics that need to be there before, right? Many times there's demand, many times there's buzz, but maybe you launch without, say, local languages or terrible customer service against expectations. So really studying the market, traveling there, talking to people, ideally hiring people from that country, ideally there or with you at the office. So I just think that you need to immerse yourself in that market fully to even begin considering targeting it.
Like I love what you say. I agree with you. I think I can't think of examples off the bat, but to I do think this is a personal view, and it probably chimes with very few brand people out there in the world today, apart from, I'm going to say, the most progressive, because that means they agree with me. The brand can be many things to many different people, and we've seen that with social. You mentioned it earlier about segmentation, yet there is still a dominant brand theory in this world. It comes from the 60s. It comes from that classic advertising generative approach about what brands mean, and we're still labouring under that, which is consistency of brand must be delivered at all stages, across all territories, at all times. It's almost like the internet never happened to that. It doesn't work for me, because you have to understand that each of your constituent parts, your tribes, we've all been through these terms, they want different things from it. They bring their own experience to the brand, to your product. What right have you got to dictate that to them? You set a framework, and then to your point, absolutely, you allow your local teams autonomy. It's what we all want as individuals, what we all want as workers. Give them a framework, give them autonomy, go out and do it. Tell them what they can and can't do, which is what McDonald's does do well, right? That's the way to execute it. But we have got a long way as people, and perhaps our responsibility for everyone in this room is to keep hammering it home to our brand people and our people in our businesses, that those days of the one flat brand that does everything across the world doesn't work. Look, best example, Nike, Adidas. Look at the collaborations they do with celebrities that they do. Unbelievably brilliant opinion leaders and thought leaders. Look at LVMH getting Pharrell. Look at these incredibly bold decisions from the hardcore luxury brands. They understand it. They instinctively get it. And yet there's still a tier of brand policing that I find quite frustrating, really, because it stops innovation. I'm going to write a dissertation when I get home. I feel like I'm pumped up today.